So, to continue, in sociology, we have four main sociological theories. And don't let this intimidate you. All this means is there's four different perspectives on why society is the way it is. Four different opinions. Maybe you think society is equal for everybody. You'd be a functionalist. Maybe you think society is inherently unequal. You'd be a conflict theorist. So I want you to think of sociological theory like this. Think of it like an award show. You know how you see these award shows and then you have these people that are critiquing what everybody wears on the red carpet? This is who made their outfit and they pick it apart, and this is who provided the jewelry, and everybody has an opinion. That is sociological theory. They all have an opinion about why society is the way it is and why it functions the way it does. And the first of these is functionalism. What functionalist theory does is focus on how our human behavior is governed by social structures that are based mainly on shared values that contribute to social stability. So let me put that in normal people speak. It's actually pretty straightforward. Generally, functionalism believes certain things. It's all about how the way society is functional. It works. Why is society the way it is? Because it works. Society is the way it is because it is functional. So let me explain this to you a little bit better. As I've already talked about, functionalism believes that all human behavior is governed by patterns of social relations or social structures. So remember, when we talk about social structures, our patterns of interaction are themselves a social structure. So picture yourself wherever you are right now, happy little student, and there's all these social structures operating around you. Keeping society as you know it running, keeping society as a whole doing what it's supposed to do. We've got the government, healthcare system, education system, family, religion, the legal system. And there you are, living your day-to-day life. All this stuff's going on around you, in many ways determining your day-to-day life, whether you realize it or not. The second point for functionalism is stability. So again, I've mentioned stability before. But let's get a little bit more specific. We've got all these social structures operating around you according to functionalism. And what they are in fact doing, what the result of their functioning is that society is stable. It's calm and it's strong. According to functionalism, this is the way society should be. There should be an equilibrium. That's the natural state of society. And if society is not stable, well, then that indicates a problem. So think about a house and the foundation under a house. The foundation is made of concrete and rebar, like really strong material to provide a good, stable foundation for the house. Functionalism says that's what all these structures do. They provide social stability for society. In a way, they are the foundation of society, and the rest of society is built around them. The rest of society just keeps on going around these social structures, just like a house is built on a stable, solid foundation. Functionalism also views society as having shared values. Having shared values is part of keeping society calm and stable, isn't it? This is extremely important because in order for a society to be stable, people in it must be relatively similar. Not exactly the same, but similar. So functionalism says that maintaining a stable society is important, and all of these structures operate to maintain stability in society, and this is partly based on shared values. I mean, this just kind of makes sense to me because when you think about it, if a society didn't have at least generally shared values among its citizens, if people didn't at least generally value the same things, then how would a society actually be a society? How would a group of people be a group if they didn't have the same values and perspectives? And again, this doesn't mean exactly the same values, but everybody in society has the same perspectives regarding certain things. Some people feel it's okay to have sex before marriage, some don't. Some go to church or a mosque or another religious building on a regular basis and are very religious, some don't. But we have at least generally agreed upon basic values, like no marriage or intimate relationships between close relatives. In Canadian society, we have an agreed upon minimum age to be married. In Canadian society, we agree you can only be married to one person at a time. We agree that women and children have certain rights in Canada. The basic values of our society are the same for everybody. And again, the natural state of a society is to be calm and stable, to maintain that equilibrium. If there's some kind of conflict, whether it's large-scale protests that disrupt the functioning of the government, or a civil war, or an outright war, according to functionalism, this is not normal and this should be corrected. The normal state of any society is to be calm and to maintain an equilibrium according to functionalism. So if there is a major disruption of some kind, or even a small disruption, think of it like a boat. A boat's rocking back and forth. You want to get back to that calm state. Now, this doesn't mean change can't occur, but it should be very slow and measured, not sudden. So overall then, I usually explain functionalism to students as the happy theory, the optimistic theory, because according to functionalism, everybody does what they're supposed to do. Everybody at least generally agrees about the way society should be. Everything in society should operate and regulate the way it's supposed to. If there's any difficulties, the goal is to get them back to that calm state of equilibrium, and everybody's generally happy. So according to functionalism, society is the way it is because it's functional for society as a whole. And this might be a simplistic way of looking at it, but it's also an effective way to remember it with the happy face. With that in mind, let's look at a functional theorist. Emile Durkheim, he was a French guy. He was a French sociologist. He is widely considered to be one of the founding fathers of sociology as a discipline. It would be impossible to take an introductory sociology course without discussing him, or a classical sociological theory course without discussing him, or if you ever take sociology of education, social theory, the same. You'll encounter his name and his work in an entire variety of sociology courses. And he was a very prolific writer, but we're only going to focus on a tiny amount of his work, but very important to sociology as a whole. For example, Durkheim is well known for his studies of suicide, believe it or not, and why somebody would possibly commit suicide. It used to be commonly believed that if a person committed suicide, they did so because of some kind of personal psychological disorder. If we used current terminology, it used to be believed that the only reason a person would commit suicide was because they were mentally ill. But Emile Durkheim disagreed with this. Instead, he said that rates of suicide vary based on social solidarity. So in other words, how connected a person is to the society around them. If somebody felt a higher degree of social solidarity if they felt a higher degree of connectedness to the society around them, then suicide would not occur, according to Durkheim. So, what he really was looking at was how much somebody felt like they were a part of society. If a person felt kind of disconnected from the society in which they lived, if they felt personally disengaged, if they felt they were not a full member of society, Durkheim said they were more likely to consider suicide. So, specifically, you can look in your text for this. Social solidarity refers to the degree to which a group's members share beliefs or values, how often they interact, and how much intensity they interact with. How does Jennifer put it? How much a person feels they're really a part of society. I mean, think about it. Having the same values and beliefs as everybody else in society is likely to make you feel like you belong with them more, that you're similar. It'll give you a sense of belonging. The more interaction you have with the people around you, the more of a sense of connectedness you feel to them. And again, to me, from a certain perspective, this is common sense. And I say that even though I'm not a functionalist at heart. But I mean, to me, it's just common sense. So when Durkheim said that the more a group's members share beliefs and values, the more frequently they interact, the more intensity they experience in that interaction, the more social solidarity they will feel with each other as part of that group, as part of society. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So if you have a society in which people generally feel a strong connection to each other, to their society as a whole, to their social world as a whole, Durkheim said you will have lower rates of suicide. So overall then, Durkheim said that groups or societies with a high degree of social solidarity has lower rates of suicide. Now, your textbook also refers to being married versus being single as an example. The fact that married people are less likely to commit suicide than people who are not married, because marriage kind of binds people to their society more. They feel more connected. This does not mean if somebody is married, they will absolutely never consider suicide, but it is less likely. And by the way, even if the marriage is not a happy one, this is because even if the marriage is an unhappy one, you are sharing bills. Even something like if you're sick, you have somebody that's going to help look after you, get you to appointments. So think about that. Even if you're unhappily married, you're likely to live longer. What is the point of all this? This has to do with Durkheim's concept of social facts. Now, we don't think of facts in this way on an everyday basis. So you're just going to have to wrap your mind around, you have to wrap your mind around the fact. I don't mean to say that. You have to wrap your mind around the realization that according to Durkheim, social facts are the social relations in which we are all embedded. So in your head, or if you're taking notes or somewhere, after the term social facts, in brackets afterward, put, according to sociology, social facts are our social relations. Just because when you're reading this later, this might trip you up. And Durkheim was studying these social facts, which are social relations in which we are all embedded. Well, social relations are directly impacted by the study of society overall, aren't they? So that is generally functionalism as a whole. Your textbook will also refer to Talcott Parsons and Robert Merton. We'll talk about these in other chapters, but make sure you're familiar with them as well. But that is functionalism as a whole. So again, social solidarity is what we're looking at here. The degree to which a person is connected to society around them. Do they really feel they're part of a society? And that's what functionalism is all about. Oh, I should have gone ahead with my slides. Like I told you, if I was in class, I would have been doing the same thing. Second theory for sociology. So there you go. There's the first one, functionalism. There you go. Now, I shouldn't say that, one of the positive things about sociological theory, I think there's many positive things. From the perspective of a student, it's positive for you that all the theories are very, very, very different. So functionalism is all about keeping smooth, stable equilibrium. Everybody does what they're supposed to do. Conflict theory is all about that, conflict. And whether you've studied sociology in the past or not, there's a good chance you've heard of Karl Marx. That's the guy you see here when he was young and when he was older. He is studied in a whole variety of disciplines, in a whole variety of manners. In journalism, economics, history, politics, philosophy, religion. Collectively, Karl Marx's theories are known as Marxism. You might also hear Karl Marx's theories referred to as conflict theory, and I will slip into the habit of using the terms interchangeably. I will refer to it as conflict theory, and I'll refer to it as Marxism. I don't feel totally bad for doing this because this is a commonly accepted thing to do in sociology. So conflict theory, Marxism, same thing. Why? Because Marx was one of the founders of conflict theory. Okay, so yeah, so there we go, same thing. And don't let that confuse you. So he was German. And when he was born is very significant to what he wrote. Marx was born in 1818, and because of this, as an adult, he saw the effect that the Industrial Revolution had and was currently having on society. This is where all his ideas came from. So, as an adult, as he was doing his writing, he was in the middle of the effect of the Industrial Revolution. That's why he focused on it so more. What is the Industrial Revolution? Very simply, it was this enormous shift that occurred in the world when mechanized means of production emerged. All this means is when societies went from everything being done by hand to the emergence of machines and quick methods of production. That's the Industrial Revolution. We're not doing stuff by hand anymore. We're using machines. So this was a really, really hugely significant. The word significant doesn't even begin to describe how significant the Industrial Revolution was for our economy, for North America and the rest of Europe, and eventually the world's. Because society went from being based on smaller scale methods of making money, like farming, small scale businesses, to large scale methods of making money in factories. So society as a whole went from hand production methods to machines. And to us in our day and time, this doesn't seem like something significant, does it? But at the time it was. And the only way I can think of to demonstrate to you what a hugely significant effect this must have had on every part of society is to imagine our current society doing the opposite. Imagine what our society would be like with no machinery or automated processes of any kind. No cars, no appliances in your homes, no large-scale methods of producing food. You'd have to make your own food. Produce your own food. No electricity. What would our society be like if we all went back to living on small family farms with no technological advances and no electricity and no machinery of any kind? How would that affect society? Daily life, what you yourself did on a daily basis, how you lived, how you washed your clothes and cooked food, or how you worked, what you did to support yourself. No matter where it is specifically that you live, how would it affect your community? how you traveled when necessary, how often you traveled without vehicles or anything to maintain roadways, how you communicated, how often you communicated without phones or computers of any kind. So, going back to an unmechanized society would affect every part of society on every level. As an individual, as a family, as a community, as a country, it would be astronomical. That is the size of the effect Karl Marx saw the Industrial Revolution having on society in the 1800s. And specifically, what Marx focused on was the development of social class struggle as a result of industrialization. So, you've got a good understanding of what industrialization is and the Industrial Revolution. What's he talking about with social class struggle? What this simply means is your social class as the position you occupy in society based on how much income or wealth you have and how you obtain that income or wealth. This is a concept I think most people are familiar with, social class. You'll have people in a lower class, middle class, a higher class, and each of these is in a better or worse position in society. Now, if people were in different social classes and they were not better or worse than another, well, then they'd just be social classes, wouldn't they? It's because social classes are better or worse, because they're in a better or worse position, some are considered more desirable than others. And I know it sounds like I'm pointing out the obvious, but I'm still going to do it. This is referred to as a hierarchy. People occupy various positions in a social class hierarchy. Another way of saying this, a social class hierarchy, is social stratification. We like this word or this term in sociology, social stratification. So I hope what I'm doing in terms of your understanding is creating kind of a domino effect. I've tried to break it down as simply as I possibly can, put it in my own language, and now I'm trying to build you back up so you understand each of these concepts. Some positions are better than others. This is social stratification. And what Karl Marx saw was that while the Industrial Revolution certainly caused society as a whole to evolve and advance in a variety of positive ways, it also created a lot of misery and poverty for certain groups of people, mainly the lower classes. So, in many ways, industrialization affected the human condition negatively. For all of the mechanical advances that occurred, which are certainly positive, at the same time, the Industrial Revolution created class struggle. The struggle between these different social classes in this hierarchy to improve their own position. If you're trying to improve your own position, you're trying to overcome the opposition of other classes. So, in other words, class struggle refers to the tension that exists between social classes because they each have their own economic interests and their own social interests. Now, just as a tip here, if you're writing this out, instead of writing socioeconomic over and over, the short term for this is SES. Save yourself some time. So, according to Marx, those people who he saw were members of the lower class who trudged out the door every day to factories to work 8 or 10 or 12-hour shifts and then trudged home again during the Industrial Revolution to their small, run-down, miserable apartments, crammed and close together. They had their own interests and concerns, their own socioeconomic status interests, such as they'd want to increase their wage as much as possible and have as much time off as possible. And years down the road, maybe create unions to advocate for their lower class interests. And then you've got the upper class. The social class that was very well off, who owned all of these factories, who owned the means of production, the factories, and lived in houses instead of slums, with multiple bedrooms and a dining room and some kind of green space on their property and servants. They had their own interests and concerns. So this is the focus. The upper owning class were concerned with keeping wages as low as possible to maximize their profits, and they were concerned with not wanting workers to take time off and trying to keep the unions out of the factories because they didn't want anyone advocating for the workers. This idea of competing interests between different social classes, which can easily become an extremely complicated and intricate idea, is the basis of conflict theory. Social class struggle as a result of industrialization is the basis of conflict theory. Now, of course, going on decades and decades, it became social class struggle itself. I'm going to summarize Marxism and conflict theory so far in everyday language to make sure you have a good understanding of it. So Marx saw this industrialization going on, and what he saw was it created a lot of inequality in society. It created economic inequality because there were these really rich factory owners making more and more and more money, while their lower class workers did not benefit from how well the factory did. They stayed in the lower classes while the owners stayed in the upper classes. You had people who were really poor that were going to stay poor, and you had people that were really well off that were going to stay really well off. These different groups of people, these different social classes, each have their own interests in mind, as I've explained. And because they don't have the same interests, this is class conflict. Clearly, this is not a happy position for the workers. But what Marx thought, and he was wrong, what Marx thought was that all of this tension, all of this class conflict would eventually boil up, picture a volcano rumbling and rumbling and rumbling, eventually exploding, and that would eventually lead to social change within society where there would be no classes and everybody would be the same. We all know that didn't happen. Now, Marxism can be extremely complicated, but at the same time, if you boil it down, it's actually a pretty simple and straightforward perspective.